The great chamber floated in the darkness of space like a massive crystal palace. Inside this enormous structure, 12 different alien races had gathered for the most important meeting in galactic history. The chamber walls glowed with soft, blue light, casting strange shadows on the creatures who had traveled from across the galaxy to be here today. High Arbiter Zexthon stood at the center podium, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. His insect-like body clicked and chittered as he spoke, while translation devices converted his words into sounds that each species could understand. Around him sat the most powerful beings in known space, each representing millions of worlds and trillions of lives. Commander Krill of the Sectoid Collective floated in his biomechanical suit, his large black eyes reflecting the chamber's light. The sectoids had been the first to raise concerns about the humans, and today they would present their evidence. Beside him, the ethereal Nyxara drifted in her containment field, her ghostly form barely visible through the energy barrier that kept her alive in normal atmosphere. Admiral Veltar of the Hegemony sat in his reinforced chair, his massive clawed, hands resting on the armrests. His reptilian face showed no emotion, but everyone in the chamber knew he had been pushing for this meeting for months. The other delegates represented equally powerful civilizations, each with their own reasons for being here. Zexthon called the session to order with a sharp clicking sound that echoed through the chamber. "We gather today to address what our analysts have termed the human problem," he announced. "These mammals from the third planet of a yellow star have become a threat that we can no longer ignore." Commander Krill activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images of human ships, cities, and colonies appeared in brilliant detail. 200 years ago, we made first contact with this species, he began. At that time, they were confined to their home system with primitive chemical rockets and basic nuclear technology. The images changed to show human expansion across nearby star systems. Today, they control 47 star systems and have established colonies on over 200 worlds. Their technology has advanced at a rate that our scientists consider impossible. Nyxara's voice echoed from her containment field, hollow and otherworldly. Our psychological evaluations of human subjects reveal disturbing patterns. They display unprecedented levels of aggression, adaptability, and what can only be described as irrational stubbornness. When faced with impossible situations, instead of surrendering as logical beings would, they become more determined to fight. Admiral Veltar leaned forward in his chair, his yellow eyes glowing. "They refuse to accept proper galactic order. Every attempt to integrate them into our established systems has failed. They question everything, challenge every protocol, and show no respect for the natural hierarchy that has maintained peace for 10,000 years." The holographic display showed footage of human military exercises. The assembled delegates watched as human soldiers moved with coordination and ferocity that unsettled many of the observers. Unlike other species that relied primarily on technology or psychic abilities, humans seemed to excel at both individual combat and large-scale tactical operations. "Their military doctrine is unlike anything we have encountered," Krill continued. "They study war as both an art and a science. They adapt enemy tactics within days of encountering them. Most disturbing of all, they seem to consider death in battle as honorable rather than tragic." Zexthon gestured for silence as murmurs rose from the assembled delegates. "The evidence is clear. In every simulation our strategists have run, human expansion continues unchecked. Within 500 years, they will control a significant portion of this galaxy. Within 1,000 years, they may challenge our combined authority." The crystalline representative, whose name could not be pronounced by organic vocal cords, communicated through harmonic vibrations. The translator rendered their thoughts into words. "Their reproductive rate exceeds galactic norms. Their technological advancement shows no signs of slowing. Most concerning, they show no fear of superior forces. We have tried diplomatic solutions," Admiral Veltar growled. They negotiate from positions of apparent weakness as if they were equals. They make demands rather than requests. They act as if the galaxy belongs to them by right rather than by our sufferance. Nixara added, Our attempts at psychic influence have failed completely. Their minds resist mental control in ways we have never encountered. They seem to thrive on conflict and challenge rather than seeking peace and order. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same result. Humans would not be contained, controlled, or integrated into galactic civilization. They would continue to expand, to challenge, to disrupt the careful balance that had maintained peace across thousands of worlds. Zex then called for the final vote as the session neared its end. The motion before this council is clear and simple. The complete elimination of the human species before they become an existential threat to galactic stability and order. One by one, each delegate cast their vote. The sectoids voted for elimination. The ethereals agreed. The hegemony supported the motion. The crystalline entities added their approval. Every race that had built the galactic civilization over millennia agreed on one thing. Humanity had to die. The final tally was displayed. For all to see, 12 votes for elimination, 0 against. It was unanimous. Far away on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison sat in a secure briefing room deep beneath the Pentagon. General Lisa Park and Admiral Tony Rodriguez flanked him as they watched the intercepted transmission from the Galactic Council. The room was silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the distant sound of air circulation. The translation of the Council's decision appeared on screens around the room. Morrison read the words twice before speaking. They just declared war on every human being alive, he said quietly. General Park stood slowly, her face grim but determined. Then we give them exactly what they expect from humans, she replied. We fight back. 3 weeks passed after the Council made their decision before the first attack came. The human colony of New Detroit in the Kepler system had no warning when death arrived from the stars. 8,000 colonists went about their daily lives, unaware that their world had been marked for destruction. Dr. Amy Johnson knelt in her hydroponic gardens, checking the nutrient levels in her tomato plants. The morning sun of Kepler 442b shone through the dome's transparent walls, creating patterns of light and shadow across the growing beds. She hummed quietly to herself as she worked, thinking about the harvest festival planned for next month. Her husband Pete worked in the machine shop on the other side of the colony, repairing mining equipment for the ore extraction teams. Their daughter Katie attended school with the other colony children, learning mathematics and science in the bright classroom built into the central habitat dome. The colony represented everything humans had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. Clean energy powered their homes, advanced recycling systems meant nothing went to waste, and the community worked together to build something better than what they had left behind on Earth. New Detroit was proof that humans could create peaceful, prosperous settlements among the stars. At 10:47 local time, the sky began to burn. Amy looked up from her plants as shadows fell across the garden dome. Massive shapes materialized in the clear blue sky above the colony, their surfaces gleaming, with alien metal and crackling energy fields. She had never seen ships like these before, but she knew immediately what they meant. The orbital bombardment platforms opened fire without warning or demand for surrender. Streams of superheated plasma fell like rain, turning buildings into vapor and people into ash. The defensive shields that protected the colony from cosmic radiation offered no protection against weapons designed to destroy entire worlds. Amy ran toward the habitat center as explosions erupted around her. The garden dome cracked and shattered, sending fragments of transparent aluminum cascading to the ground. She could hear screaming from across the colony as people fled from their homes and workplaces. "Pete!" she shouted into her communicator as she ran. "Pete, where are you? Static answered her for several seconds before his voice came through, strained and desperate. "I'm at the school! I'm getting Katie! Meet us at Bunker 7! The emergency sirens finally began wailing, but most of the colony's defenses had been destroyed in the first minutes of the attack. The handful of security officers tried to coordinate an evacuation, but there was nowhere to run. The alien ships surrounded the entire settlement, methodically reducing every structure to rubble. Amy reached the school building just as another plasma beam struck the communications tower. The explosion knocked her to the ground, and when she looked up, half the school was gone. Parents and children ran from the burning ruins, some carrying injured classmates and teachers. She found Pete and Katie huddled behind an overturned transport vehicle. Katie was crying, her small hands pressed against her ears to block out the sound of destruction. Pete's face was covered in dust and blood from a cut on his forehead. "The bunkers are compromised," he told her grimly. "Direct hits on bunkers 3 and 5. The others are sealed, but I don't think the life support systems are working." Around them, the colony that had taken 5 years to build was disappearing in clouds of smoke and fire. The alien ships moved with mechanical precision, targeting not just buildings, but any area where humans might be hiding. There would be no survivors if they remained on the surface. "The caves," Amy said suddenly. "The old mining tunnels in Sector 12. They're deep enough and far enough from the main colony." Pete nodded and lifted Katie into his arms. "Can you run?" Amy checked her emergency kit and grabbed a medical scanner from the school's first aid station. "Lead the way." They ran through streets filled with debris and bodies, dodging falling chunks of building material and staying low to avoid the scanning beams from the alien ships. Other survivors had the same idea, and small groups of colonists moved toward the old mining site like ghosts fleeing a graveyard. The entrance to the abandoned mine was hidden behind a ridge of rock formations that had protected it from the initial bombardment. Amy counted 43 people who made it to the caves, including 16 children and 5 elderly colonists who could barely walk. They huddled in the darkness as the destruction continued above them. The sound of explosions echoed through the rock walls, and dust fell from the ceiling with each impact. Katie had stopped crying but remained pressed against her father's chest, her eyes wide with shock. Captain Jake Morrison's fleet received the distress signal 40 minutes after the attack began. The 3rd Human Defense Squadron was patrolling the outer rim when the automated emergency beacon from New Detroit reached their ships. Morrison stood on the bridge of the HMS Defiance, watching the tactical display as his navigation officer calculated jump coordinates. "How long to reach Kepler 442? He asked. Lieutenant Sam Carter checked his instruments. 18 minutes at maximum hyperspace velocity, sir." "All ships, emergency jump in 60 seconds, Morrison ordered. "Battle stations." The 5 ships of the 3rd Squadron made the jump to hyperspace in perfect formation. Morrison had trained his crews for emergency responses, but he had never imagined they would be responding to an attack on human civilians. The intelligence reports from Earth had warned that contact with the Galactic Council was becoming hostile, but no one had expected an immediate military strike. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, the tactical sensors painted a grim picture. New Detroit was gone, reduced to a crater of molten rock and twisted metal. Orbital debris from destroyed buildings drifted in expanding clouds around the planet. "Life signs?" Morrison asked quietly. "Scanning now, sir," Carter replied. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I'm reading scattered groups in the underground areas, maybe 60 or 70 survivors total. And enemy ships? 3 vessels holding position in high orbit. Configuration matches sectoid destroyer class based on our intelligence files." Morrison studied the alien ships on his main screen. They were larger than any human vessel, their hulls gleaming with energy shields and weapon arrays. His 5 ships were fast and well-armed, but they had never faced technology this advanced. "Sir," Carter said, "the sectoid ships are preparing to jump to hyperspace." Morrison made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. "All ships, Attack Formation Delta! We're going to show these bastards what happens when you murder human families! The human ships accelerated toward the alien vessels with desperate fury. Morrison knew his fleet was outgunned, but he also knew something the sectoids had not yet learned about humans. When pushed beyond the breaking point, they became more dangerous, not less. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the HMS Retribution, the newest ship in Morrison's fleet. She watched the range close between her vessel and the lead sectoid destroyer. "All weapons ready, sir," her tactical officer reported. "Fire everything we have," Mitchell ordered. "Make them remember this day." The battle was brief but vicious. Human ships used the asteroid field for cover, emerging to fire nuclear torpedoes at point-blank range before disappearing again. The sectoids had superior technology, but they fought like machines, following predictable patterns. Mitchell's ship took fatal damage from a plasma cannon, but instead of abandoning ship, she ordered, ramming speed. The HMS Retribution struck the sectoid flagship head-on, both vessels disappearing in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire system. The remaining sectoid ships fled into hyperspace, but the message had been sent. Humanity would not die. Quietly, and they would make their enemies pay for every life taken. After losing 12 colonies in the first month of the war, humanity learned to disappear. The lessons from New Detroit spread quickly through the colonial network, and every human settlement began preparing for the inevitable attacks. But instead of building stronger surface defenses, they dug deeper underground. Commander Ben Walsh stood in the command center of Terra Nova, the largest human settlement outside Earth's solar system. The colony housed nearly 2 million people. Across 6 continents of a planet they had renamed New Hope. Intelligence reports indicated that Galactic Council forces were massing for an assault that would dwarf the destruction of New Detroit. "Status report," Walsh said to his assembled staff. The command center had been built 300 meters underground, carved directly into the bedrock and reinforced with steel and ceramic composites. Dr. Linda Brooks, the former head of Colonial Research, had spent the last month converting civilian technology into military applications. "The tunnel networks are complete," she reported. "We can move the entire population underground within 6 hours. The thermal masking systems are operational, and we have supply caches distributed throughout the cave systems." Walsh nodded as he studied the holographic map of Terra Nova's underground infrastructure. The colonists had worked around the clock to prepare for this moment, expanding natural cave systems and mining tunnels into a vast subterranean city. "What about weapons?" "The plasma mining cutters have been modified for combat use," Brooks explained. "They're not designed as weapons, but they'll cut through alien armor as easily as they cut through rock. The industrial fabricators can produce ammunition and spare parts indefinitely as long as we have raw materials." Lieutenant Chris Murphy, who had served as head of colony security before the war began, stepped forward. "Sir, we've identified 47 strategic targets on the surface that the aliens will want to capture intact. Spaceports, communication arrays, power plants. We've rigged them all with explosives." "Good," Walsh replied. "If they want our world, they can have the ashes." The first Galactic Council ships appeared in orbit 3 days later. Walsh watched from the underground command center as massive Vortanian battleships took positions around the planet. Unlike the quick strike that had destroyed New Detroit, this appeared to be a full-scale invasion designed to capture Terra Nova as a staging area for further attacks. "All civilians to deep shelters," Walsh ordered. "Security teams to assigned positions. Remember, we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're making them pay for every meter of ground." The Vortanian ground assault began at dawn. Thousands of alien troops descended from orbit in armored transports, expecting to find human defenders manning surface fortifications. Instead, they found empty cities and silent streets. The only signs of human presence were the massive explosions that destroyed every piece of infrastructure as the aliens approached. Field Commander Kexalon led the Vortanian First Army as they advanced through the abandoned capital city. His troops moved cautiously through streets lined with empty buildings, their sensors scanning for any sign of human resistance. The thermal readings showed life signs throughout the area, but they appeared to be coming from underground. Deploy. Seismic charges, Kexlon ordered. Collapse their tunnel systems and force them to the surface. The first explosions brought down several mining tunnels, but the humans had anticipated this tactic. The main tunnel networks were built in sections with redundant connections, designed to survive partial collapse. More importantly, the humans had learned to use the planet's natural geothermal activity to mask their heat signatures. Murphy led the first counterattack from hidden tunnels that emerged directly underneath a Vortanian supply depot. His team of 20 humans moved like ghosts through the alien camp, using modified plasma cutters to destroy equipment and eliminate guards before melting back into the underground network. Target destroyed, Murphy reported through quantum-encrypted communications. No human casualties. Estimated enemy losses: 43 soldiers and 2 transport vehicles. Similar attacks erupted across the planet as human resistance cells struck from tunnels, caves, and hidden bunkers. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see, predict, or pin down. Every patrol that ventured away from the main bases disappeared. Every supply convoy was ambushed. Every communication relay was sabotaged. Walsh coordinated the resistance from his underground command center, watching as his people turned the planet into a maze of death for the occupying forces. They have superior numbers and technology, he told his officers, but they're fighting on our terms now. Dr. Brooks had established weapons manufacturing facilities in the deepest caves, where the sound of machinery was masked by underground rivers and geothermal vents. Her teams worked constantly to produce ammunition, explosives, and modified equipment for the resistance fighters. The beauty of their technology, she explained to Walsh, is that it's standardized across all council species. Once we figure out how to disrupt one type of shield or armor, the knowledge applies to all of them. The underground facilities also served as hospitals, schools, and living quarters for the civilian population. Children attended classes in converted mining chambers while their parents worked to support the resistance. The elderly tended hydroponic gardens that provided food for the underground cities. Above ground, the Vortanian occupation forces found themselves controlling empty territory. They held the surface installations, but the installations no longer functioned. They occupied the cities, but the cities were hollow shells. Every building they searched revealed nothing but empty rooms and booby traps. Commander Kexlon filed increasingly frustrated reports to his superiors. The humans refuse to engage in open battle, he reported. They strike without warning and disappear before we can respond. Our casualty rates are unacceptable for what should have been a simple occupation. The psychological impact on the Vortanian troops was severe. Soldiers trained for conventional warfare found themselves constantly looking over their shoulders, never knowing when or where the next attack would come. Sleep became difficult when every sound might signal an approaching human infiltrator. Murphy's raids became more sophisticated as his teams learned Vortanian patrol patterns and equipment weaknesses. They began capturing alien weapons and vehicles, turning the occupiers' own technology against them. A human driving a stolen Vortanian transport could move freely through enemy checkpoints. "Sir," Murphy reported after a particularly successful raid, "we've captured a communications hub intact. Dr. Brooks thinks she can crack their encryption codes." Brooks worked for 3 days to break into the Vortanian military network. When she succeeded, the intelligence she gathered changed everything. "They're not just occupying our world," she told Walsh. "They're using it as a base to coordinate attacks on 27 other human colonies." Walsh made the decision that would define humanity's response to the Galactic Council's genocide campaign. "We're not just fighting for Terra Nova anymore," he announced to his assembled commanders. "We're fighting for every human world. If they want to use our planet as their base, we'll make sure it's the last mistake they ever make." The resistance shifted from defensive guerrilla warfare to active sabotage of Council military operations. Human teams infiltrated alien communication centers, feeding false information into their networks and disrupting coordination between Council fleets. Supply convoys carrying weapons and provisions to other battlefronts never reached their destinations. On Earth, General Lisa Park received regular updates from Terra Nova through quantum-encrypted channels. The reports showed that humanity's underground strategy was working better than anyone had hoped. "They're learning something about humans that they should have known before they started this war," she told her staff. "We don't know how to quit." The war that the Galactic Council had expected to end with quick, decisive strikes was becoming a grinding campaign of attrition. Every human world they attacked became a source of constant harassment and sabotage. Every colony they occupied required massive resources to maintain control. Commander Kexalon's final report before requesting reassignment was blunt and desperate. "These humans are not behaving like any species we have encountered in 10,000 years of galactic expansion. They do not surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They do not negotiate from positions of weakness. They appear to become more dangerous and determined as their situation becomes more desperate. I respectfully recommend that we reconsider our strategic approach to this conflict." But the Galactic Council had committed to the complete extermination of humanity, and there could be no retreat from that decision. The war would continue, and the aliens would learn that underground was only the beginning of human adaptability. 6 months into the war, humanity was losing badly, but they were learning quickly. Half their colonies had fallen to Galactic Council forces, Earth itself was under siege, and the alien fleets seemed endless. But humans possessed something the Council species had never encountered, the ability to innovate desperately when survival was at stake. Dr. Kevin Hayes worked in a hidden laboratory carved deep beneath the ruins of Luna Base. The moon's surface had been bombed into craters by sectoid raiders, but the underground facilities remained intact and functional. Hayes had been studying captured alien technology for weeks, trying to understand how Council shields and weapons operated. "I think I have it," he announced to his team of engineers and scientists. They gathered around his workstation where holographic displays showed the complex energy patterns of alien defensive systems. "Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also standardized across all Council species." Engineer Diane Powell leaned closer to examine the data. She had lost her husband and 2 children when Tau Ceti colony was destroyed, and now she worked 18-hour days driven by grief and determination. "What do you mean by standardized?" Hayes manipulated the hologram to show shield frequencies, from captured Vortanian, sectoid, and ethereal equipment. "Look at these harmonic patterns. They all use the same fundamental frequency base, just at different amplitudes. It's like they all learned shield technology from the same source." Powell studied the readings with growing excitement. "If they share the same base frequency, then theoretically we could find a universal disruption pattern." "Exactly," Hayes replied. "Their shields are more powerful than anything we can build, but they're also predictable. If we can modulate our weapons to produce the exact inverse frequency, their shields become useless." The breakthrough had come from analyzing wreckage from the Battle of Kepler, where Captain Morrison's fleet had destroyed 3 sectoid ships. Human salvage teams had recovered pieces of alien hull plating and shield generators, giving Earth scientists their first real look at Council technology. Hayes and his team worked for 3 weeks to develop the harmonic disruptor technology. The concept was simple. Instead of trying to overpower alien shields with brute force, they would cancel out the shield frequencies the same way noise-canceling headphones block sound waves. The first prototype was crude, a modification kit that could be installed on existing human plasma cannons and railguns. But when they tested it against a captured Vortanian shield generator, the results were spectacular. The alien defensive field collapsed instantly, leaving the target completely vulnerable. "We need to get this to every human fleet immediately," Powell said as she watched the test footage. "How quickly can we mass-produce the modification kits?" Hayes was already working on that problem. "The fabrication plants on Titan are still operational. If we can get the technical specifications to them, they can produce enough kits to outfit the entire Earth Defense Force within 2 weeks." The challenge was getting the information past the Council blockade. Enemy ships surrounded Earth's solar system, intercepting any communications or supply runs. But humanity had learned to be creative about solving impossible problems. Captain Julie Thompson commanded a small stealth ship called the Swift Arrow, designed for reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. Her crew specialized in dangerous runs through heavily defended space, and they had successfully delivered supplies to besieged colonies throughout the war. "The data package is loaded," Thompson told her communications officer as they prepared to leave Luna Base. "If we can reach the Titan facilities, this could change everything." The Swift Arrow slipped through the outer asteroid belt, using the chaos of floating rocks and debris to mask their heat signature. Council sensors were designed to detect large fleet movements, not individual ships moving slowly and quietly through natural cover. Thompson's navigation officer, Lieutenant Dan Roberts, plotted a course that would take them through the most dangerous part of the journey in minimum time. "We'll have a 15-minute window when we're exposed to direct sensor sweeps," he reported. "After that, we can use Titan's atmosphere to hide our approach." The run to Titan was successful, and within days, the fabrication plants were producing harmonic disruptor kits at maximum capacity. But the real test would come when human forces used the new weapons against Council fleets in actual combat. Admiral Tony Rodriguez commanded the Earth Defense Force from his flagship, the UES Independence. Intelligence reports indicated that a massive Council armada was preparing for a final assault on Earth, and Rodriguez knew this might be humanity's last chance to prove they could fight back effectively. "All ships report harmonic disruptors installed and tested," his tactical officer announced. "Fleet composition: 47 destroyers, 23 cruisers, and 8 battleships." Rodriguez studied the tactical display showing both human and alien forces. The Council fleet outnumbered his ships 3-1, with vessels that were individually more powerful than anything humanity had built. But now they had a weapon that might level the playing field. "The enemy fleet is moving into attack formation," his sensor operator reported. "Estimated time to weapons range 37 minutes. Rodriguez opened a communication channel to all ships in his fleet. "This is Admiral Rodriguez to all vessels. Today we find out if human ingenuity can beat alien arrogance. Remember what they did to our colonies. Remember why we're fighting. All ships, prepare for combat." The Battle of Earth began when the lead Council ships opened fire with their massive plasma cannons. But instead of the devastating bombardment that had destroyed so many human worlds, their weapons struck the harmonic disrupted shields of human ships and scattered harmlessly into space. Rodriguez watched in amazement as enemy fire passed through his ship's defenses without causing any damage. "All weapons, target the lead hegemony dreadnought. Fire!" The human fleet's modified weapons tore through Council shields like they were made of paper. Plasma bolts and railgun slugs that should have been deflected by energy barriers struck alien hulls directly, causing massive explosions and system failures. The hegemony Admiral Veltar watched from his command bridge as his supposedly invincible fleet took catastrophic damage. "How are they penetrating our defenses?" he roared at his tactical officers. "Our shields should be impenetrable to their primitive weapons." But there was no time for analysis. Human ships pressed their sudden advantage, moving in coordinated attack formations that targeted Council vessels with ruthless efficiency. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years found themselves helpless against weapons that shouldn't have been able to harm them. Captain Thompson, now commanding a destroyer squadron, led a strike against the sectoid carrier group. "All ships focus fire on their command vessel," she ordered. "Let's show them what happens when they underestimate human engineers." The battle that should have ended human resistance instead became a rout. Council forces that had expected easy Victory found themselves facing an enemy that could negate their primary technological advantage. Within 6 hours, the alien armada was in full retreat. Rodriguez stood on his bridge watching enemy ships flee into hyperspace. "Damage report," he called out. "Minimal casualties across the fleet, sir," his tactical officer replied. "7 ships with minor damage, no vessels lost." The victory at Earth changed the entire course of the war. For the first time since the conflict began, human forces had won a major battle against superior numbers. More importantly, they had proven that Council technology could be defeated. Dr. Hayes received reports from battlefields across human space as his harmonic disruptor technology spread to every fleet and colony defense force. "It's working everywhere," he told Powell as they reviewed the data. "Council forces are retreating from systems they've held for months." Powell smiled for the first time since losing her family. "They made one critical mistake," she said. "They assumed their technology would always be superior to ours. They never considered that we might learn to turn their own advantages against them." Within weeks of the breakthrough, human forces began their first major counteroffensive. Admiral Morrison, now commanding an entire battle group, led the liberation of New Olympia Colony. His ships emerged from hyperspace to find a council garrison that expected easy victory against primitive human weapons. "Surprise," Morrison said quietly as his fleet opened fire with harmonic disruptors. The alien base shields collapsed instantly, leaving the occupying forces defenseless against human bombardment. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted. Council forces that had seemed invincible just months before now faced an enemy that could match their technology and exceed their determination. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were most dangerous when they had something to prove. The war's momentum shifted dramatically after the Battle of Earth, and what had begun as an attempted genocide became a nightmare for the Galactic Council species. Human forces went on the offensive with a ferocity that caught their enemies completely unprepared. The hunters had become the hunted. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the largest human fleet in history as he led the liberation campaign across the Outer Rim. His ships moved from system to system with ruthless efficiency, using hit-and-run tactics that left Council forces scattered and demoralized. The alien species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia found themselves retreating before an enemy they had tried to exterminate. "Next target is the Verdania system," Morrison announced to his fleet commanders during their daily briefing. The holographic display showed a jungle world occupied by ethereal forces who were using it as a staging area for attacks on nearby human colonies. "Intelligence indicates approximately 50,000 ethereal troops and support personnel." Captain Helen Ross, now commanding the assault cruiser Vengeance, studied the tactical data. "Sir, the ethereals have established psychic amplification networks across the planet. They're using them to coordinate their mental attacks on human settlements." Morrison nodded grimly. The ethereals had been the most successful council species at fighting humans, using their psychic abilities to break human morale and coordination. But recent battles had shown that their mental powers were not as effective as expected. "Colonel Rick Davis and his Marines will handle the ground assault," Morrison continued. "The 4th Marine Division has been specifically trained for anti-psychic operations." Davis had led ground forces on 6 different worlds, learning through bitter experience how to fight enemies with mental powers. His Marines wore specially designed helmets that disrupted psychic attacks, and they had developed tactics that relied on emotional intensity rather than calm coordination. The assault on Verdania began with orbital bombardment of ethereal installations, followed by marine drops into the planet's dense jungle regions. Davis led his troops through terrain that should have favored the defending forces, but the humans turned the environment to their advantage. "Remember your training," Davis told his squad leaders as they moved through the thick vegetation. "Stay angry, stay focused. Don't give them clean thoughts to latch onto." The ethereals had dominated other species through precise mental manipulation, reading their enemies' thoughts and exploiting their fears. but human minds proved to be chaotic and unpredictable, filled with emotions that the psychic attackers could not understand or control. Psi Commander Nyx Ara led the ethereal defense from her command post deep in the jungle. She had successfully conquered dozens of worlds using coordinated psychic assaults, but the human minds resisted her abilities in ways she had never encountered. "Their thoughts are too intense," she reported to her subordinates. "We cannot achieve proper mental locks. Their emotions interfere with our psychic targeting systems." Davis and his Marines used the jungle to their advantage, moving in small groups that struck without warning before melting back into the dense foliage. The ethereals found themselves fighting an enemy that thrived on the very chaos and aggression that should have made them vulnerable to mental attack. "Sir, we've located their primary amplification array," Sergeant Billy Cooper reported to Davis through encrypted communications. "It's heavily defended, but we can approach from the river valley." The assault on the psychic amplifier was brutal and direct. Human Marines charged through ethereal defenses, using flamethrowers and explosives to destroy equipment that had taken years to construct. The aliens' mental attacks only made the humans more determined and aggressive. Meanwhile, Captain Ross led a daring raid on the sectoid homeworld to capture military codes and intelligence data. Her team infiltrated the heavily defended planet using captured alien transport ships, moving through sectoid space undetected until they reached their target. "The planetary defense grid is controlled from a central facility in the capital city," Ross explained to her strike team. "We get in, download everything they have, and get out before they know we were there." The sectoid homeworld had never been attacked by an enemy force. For 10,000 years, it had been the secure heart of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The idea that primitive humans could penetrate their defenses was inconceivable to the sectoid leadership. Ross's team moved through the alien city like ghosts, using stolen identification codes and uniforms to access restricted areas. The sectoids' reliance on technology made them vulnerable to human infiltration tactics that relied on improvisation and adaptability. "Data package acquired," Ross reported as her team accessed the central computer systems. "Downloading military, deployment schedules, fleet compositions, and communication protocols." The intelligence gathered from the sectoid homeworld revolutionized human military planning. Dr. Linda Brooks, now heading human military research, worked around the clock to analyze the captured information and develop countermeasures to Council technology. "Their equipment is incredibly sophisticated," she explained to General Lisa Park during a secure briefing, "but it's also inflexible. They never expected anyone to steal and improve their designs." Brooks's teams reverse-engineered captured Council technology at an alarming rate, often improving alien designs within weeks of acquiring them. Human engineers approached problems differently than Council scientists, using trial-and-error methods that produced unexpected breakthroughs. The psychological impact of human raids was devastating to Council morale. Species that had never faced serious military threats found themselves constantly under attack by an enemy that seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. Admiral Veltar of the Hegemony filed increasingly desperate reports to the remaining Council leadership. "Human expansion has accelerated beyond all projections," he wrote. "They have established forward bases in 17 strategic systems. Their ships now move faster than ours, and their weapons are more effective than our own." The Battle of Proxima Station demonstrated just how far human military capabilities had advanced. Morrison's fleet faced a Council armada 3 times its size, but the alien ships fought with outdated tactics against an enemy that had learned to adapt and innovate in real time. "All ships, execute flanking maneuver Delta," Morrison ordered as his fleet engaged the Council forces. Human ships moved with coordinated precision that no single alien species had ever achieved, combining individual initiative with group tactics. The Council commanders watched in horror as their superior numbers and technology proved inadequate. against human strategy and determination. Ships that should have been invincible fell to coordinated attacks that exploited weaknesses the aliens didn't know they had. Captain Thompson, commanding a squadron of destroyers, led her ships through the enemy formation like a pack of wolves hunting among sheep. "Target their command vessels," she ordered. "Cut off their coordination, and they'll fall apart." The battle ended with complete human victory and the destruction or capture of the entire Council fleet. Morrison stood on his bridge watching as alien survivors were rescued from disabled ships, knowing that each victory brought humanity closer to ending the war on their terms. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 14 Council facilities in this sector." Morrison considered the request for several long moments. The same aliens who had voted to exterminate every human in the galaxy were now asking for mercy from the people they had tried to destroy. "Tell them," he said finally, "that we'll accept their surrender. But remind them that they started this war by deciding humanity was too dangerous to exist." The liberation campaigns continued as human forces reclaimed world after world from Council occupation. Each victory brought captured technology, strategic intelligence, and proof that the alien species were not invincible. On Earth, General Park coordinated the expanding war effort from the Pentagon Command Center. Reports flowed in from across human space, showing the remarkable transformation of the conflict. "6 months ago, we were fighting for survival," she told her staff. "Today, we're dictating the terms of this war. The Council species are learning, something they should have understood before they voted for our extinction." Colonel Davis, now promoted to general after his victories on 12 different worlds, summed up the new reality in his final report from Verdania. "They wanted to eliminate us because they thought we were too dangerous. They were right about one thing. We are dangerous, but only to those who threaten us first." The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers, but their refusal to accept defeat when fighting for their survival. 1 year after the Galactic Council's unanimous vote to exterminate humanity, High Arbiter Zexthon stood before an emergency assembly of the surviving Council members. The great crystal chamber that had once symbolized galactic unity now felt empty and desperate. Half the delegate seats were vacant, their occupants either dead or fled to distant corners of the galaxy. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the devastating reality that no Council leader wanted to acknowledge. Human forces now controlled 30% of former Council territory, and their expansion showed no signs of slowing. The war that was supposed to end with quick human extinction had become a nightmare that threatened the very existence of galactic civilization. "The extinction campaign has failed," Zexthon admitted, his translator struggling to convey his species' equivalent of complete despair. "Human military expansion has accelerated beyond all strategic projections." Commander Krill of the Sectoid Collective was one of the few original Council members still alive. His homeworld had fallen to human forces 3 months earlier, and he now commanded his fleet from a mobile base that moved constantly to avoid human hunters. "They have reverse-engineered our hyperspace technology and improved it," Krill reported, his large black eyes reflecting the chamber's diminished light. "Human ships now move faster than our fastest vessels. They have established forward bases in 17 strategic systems that we considered impregnable." The assembled delegates watched footage from the Battle of Proxima Station, where Admiral Morrison's fleet had defeated a Council armada 3 times its size. The human ships moved with coordinated precision that none of the Council species had ever achieved, combining individual creativity with group tactics that seemed impossible. "They fight as one mind while maintaining individual initiative," Admiral Veltar reported, his massive frame slumped in defeat. "According to our military theorists, such coordination should be impossible. Yet they achieve it naturally." Ethereal. Psi Commander Nixara floated in her containment field, her ghostly form barely visible through the energy barrier. "Our psychic attacks have proven completely ineffective," she admitted. "Human minds resist mental control in ways we cannot understand. They seem to become more dangerous when subjected to psychic pressure." The footage continued, showing human ground forces on Verdania overwhelming ethereal defenders despite being outnumbered 10-1. Human marines moved through alien defenses like natural predators, using emotion and aggression as weapons that psychic attacks could not counter. Zexthon gestured for silence as murmurs of fear rose from the assembled delegates. "We must face the truth that we have been avoiding. This species that we dismissed as primitive has become the dominant military force in our galaxy." The crystalline representative communicated through harmonic vibrations that the translator rendered into words. "Human technological advancement exceeds all recorded patterns. They acquire our designs and improve them within days. Their innovation rate suggests they will surpass our cumulative knowledge within decades." On the human flagship UES Determination, Admiral Morrison received the Council's first official communication since the war began. He stood in his command center surrounded by officers who had fought in every major battle of the conflict. Men and women who had lost everything to alien aggression and won it back through determination and sacrifice. "Sir," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Mary Fields, "we're receiving a transmission on diplomatic channels. The Galactic Council is requesting terms for conditional surrender." Morrison looked out at the sprawling alien city below, his fleet, the capital world of Zentari Prime, where the Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. His ships filled the sky above the planet, a mix of human vessels and captured alien technology that had been improved beyond its original specifications. Captain Helen Ross stood beside him, her uniform bearing the scars of ground combat on a dozen worlds. "Conditional surrender?" she said with bitter amusement. "They voted unanimously to wipe out our entire species." Morrison studied the tactical display showing the positions of his fleet. Every ship was crewed by humans who had lost family members, friends, and homes to the Council's attempted genocide. They had fought across half the galaxy to reach this moment. "Tell them," Morrison said quietly, "that they should have thought about terms before they decided every human in the galaxy needed to die." On Earth, General Lisa Park participated in the surrender negotiations through quantum-encrypted communications. She sat in the same Pentagon briefing room where the war had begun, but everything had changed. The scattered human settlements that had been fighting for survival were now the core of an expanding interstellar empire. "The Council representatives are requesting guaranteed territorial autonomy for their core worlds," Park reported to Morrison and the other fleet commanders. "They're offering complete technological exchange and resource-sharing agreements." Admiral Rodriguez, commanding the Sol Defense Fleet, laughed harshly. "They tried to exterminate us, and now they want to negotiate as equals?" Morrison considered the offer for several long moments. The human fleet could destroy Zentari Prime and several other Council homeworlds, but that would make humanity no better than the aliens who had tried to destroy them. Yet mercy could not come without justice. "Here are our terms," Morrison said. "Finally, complete and unconditional surrender of all Council military forces. Full reparations for every human life lost and every colony destroyed. War crimes trials for all Council leaders who voted for human extinction." The negotiations continued for 3 days, while human fleets maintained positions around every major Council world. The aliens who had once considered humanity too primitive to merit consideration found themselves begging for terms from the species they had tried to destroy. Dr. Kevin Hayes, now leading the Human Science Consortium, presented his analysis of captured Council technology to the Surrender Commission. Their scientific advancement followed predictable patterns for thousands of years, he explained. They perfected existing technologies but rarely developed revolutionary concepts. Dr. Linda Brooks added her assessment of alien military capabilities. "They relied on technological superiority and numerical advantage," she said. They never developed adaptive tactics because they never faced an enemy that could match their equipment. The formal surrender came when the last Council fleet was surrounded in the Arcturus system. High Arbiter Zexthon transmitted the official dissolution of the Galactic Council rather than face the continued expansion of human space. "We underestimated them completely," he admitted in his final transmission. "We saw their primitive technology and assumed they would remain primitive. We observed their aggressive nature and believed it made them weak. We were wrong about everything." Morrison accepted the surrender aboard his flagship, with representatives from every human colony that had survived the war. The ceremony was broadcast across human space, marking the end of the conflict that had been intended to destroy humanity forever. The Galactic Council made their choice when they voted unanimously for human extinction, Morrison said, as he addressed the galaxy. "They were right about one thing. We are dangerous, but only to those who threaten our families and our freedom." The various alien species retreated to their core worlds, having learned that humans were most dangerous when fighting for survival. Their attempt to eliminate humanity had accomplished exactly the opposite. It had transformed a scattered collection of peaceful colonies into the galaxy's newest superpower. 5 years later, Admiral Morrison stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where he had first learned of the Council's death sentence. The walls now displayed maps of human territory that stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. "The former Council species are requesting membership in our Terran Federation," reported Ambassador Kate Phillips, who had been elected to represent human interests in galactic affairs. "They're offering full integration of their remaining technology and complete compliance with human governance structures." Morrison smiled without humor as he remembered the desperate fight for survival that had brought them to this point. It's remarkable how their attitude changed once they realized we weren't going to be exterminated quietly. General Park, now serving as Secretary of Galactic Affairs, reviewed the membership applications from species that had once voted for human extinction. "They're learning what we've always known," she said. "Humans can be the best allies or the worst enemies in the galaxy. The choice was always theirs." Outside the Pentagon, construction crews worked on the new memorial wall, where 8 million names honored the humans who had died in the war that was supposed to end humanity forever. Instead, it had begun the human age of the galaxy. The inscription at the base read simply, "They underestimated us. We made sure the galaxy never would again." Morrison walked among the names of the fallen, remembering New Detroit and Terra Nova, and all the worlds where humans had fought impossible odds and won through determination and sacrifice. The aliens had been right about one thing. Humanity was dangerous when threatened. They had just learned that lesson far too late to save themselves from the consequences of their decision. The galaxy belonged to humanity now,